Welcome back to Make It Stick. Let's go into Anki to start out with. Three flashcards. What are the 8 sections of Chapter 3 Mix Up Your Practice? The myth of mass practice. Space practice, interleave practice, varied practice. Developing discrimination skills, improving complex mastery for medical students. These principles are broadly applicable to takeaway. Good. What are the 7 tools/habits for calibrating your judgment? Retrieval/quizzing / self-testing, testing. Peer instruction. Pay attention to what cues you're using to judge your learning. Mentorships, apprenticeships, / groups. Man, are you kidding me? Simulations. Mistakes you actually make in the field. Corrective / peer feedback. What is Chapter 4 Embrace Difficulties about in 1 sentence? Chapter 4 Embrace Difficulties is largely about desirable difficulties, how they lead to more learning largely through more cognitive effort. Desirable difficulties are difficulties, I'm kind of going beyond 1 sentence, but desirable difficulties are, basically difficulties that lead to more cognitive effort to try to overcome. Spaced, interleaved, and varied practice are all examples of desirable difficulties. Desirable difficulties: testing / retrieval, spacing, interleaving, varying generation, some contextual / fluency interruptions are learning techniques that lead to short-term impediments, but deeper, longer-lasting learning with more learning transfer largely to increased amount of effort. Wow. All right. Desirable difficulties such as testing, retrieval, interleave, varied, and space practice. Generation, some contextual / fluency interruptions. These lead to short-term impediments, but long-term gains, largely through long-term gains mean better attention, more learning, better learning transfer, largely through increased cognitive effort. We're going to say again on that. All right, we'll see that tomorrow. Oh my gosh. What did we learn about yesterday? All right. I can't remember if we learned about, or if we finished reading the varied practice section, or we started with the other tips. I think we finished. We didn't talk about varied practice. We read about the 3rd tip being interleaved practice. Okay, developing discrimination skills, form of space practice. Compared to block practice, the baseball studies. Yeah, we got all that. What did it end on? I don't know. I didn't think we read that yesterday. I think we started with elaboration. So we're in other tips for students beyond the 3 main tips: retrieval, spaced, and interleave practice. Beyond that, we got elaboration. We went over yesterday. We've got variation. We didn't talk about variation, no. You got elaboration. Calibration is the last one we got on. Reflection. Elaboration. something, reflection, calibration. What even is varied practice? Speaking of like changing contexts of a specific, it's looking at the same problem in different ways, starting at different times, etc. Golly, dude, what? Okay, we'll start with the elaboration. What is elaboration? Elaboration, generation, reflection, calibration. Those are the four we went over yesterday. Elaboration is essentially drawing more meaning from gaining more adding more meaning, context and meaning to information. It multiplies the memory cues you have associated with that information. How do you do it? Well, there's many ways you can add more context and more, what did I say? More meaning to information. You can explain it in your own words. You can teach it. You can teach it like in simpler terms. You can just talk about it. You can, you can use metaphors. You can tie in visual information. These are all forms of elaboration. Generation. This is essentially attempting to do something, attempting to answer a question, attempting to perform something before learning how to do it or being taught how to do it. And this has the effect of actually priming the mind to be more open to new information. And it leads to more learning once you are taught how to do it, or learn how to do it. Reflection is really a form of retrieval and elaboration. It's really kind of mostly referring to thinking about, or somehow, thinking about some key questions either asked explicitly or implicitly. What were the key points? What went wrong? What did I learn? What were the new things that I had never seen before? How does this fit into things I already know? This is very similar to elaboration in a lot of ways, but more so it's kind of reflecting on key questions. What would I do? What went well? What poorly? What will go better? What would I do next time? What am I going to do next time, etc. What's not so well. Calibration. This is the one we left off on. This is really like, we didn't actually take any notes yet on it, but it's basically like a practice that helps you better align your understanding of your own skills and knowledge with objective reality, such as the 7 ways to calibrate your judgment that we already went through in that Anki flashcard. Just in case we were at the end of an interleaved practice, I would say that overall section was about interleaved practice being more effective than block practice. And how about one thing? Intuitively, we like the mass practice, the block practice, but it's not as good as interleaved practice over the long term at all. Developing discrimination skills helps you to better understand the underlying principles of the problems and actually solve real world problems due to those better discrimination skills. All right. What is block practice? Is mastering one thing before attempting the next thing. All right. Elaboration, additional meaning, concepts, connecting things to what you already know, that's another one. Okay, generation. Experimental learning, that is learning by doing, is a form of generation. Generative learning. Cool. Reflection. Cool. All right. I'm going to jump back in now to reading, and then I'll be back to recall about what I learned in a little bit. All right. We finished reading up about calibration. Calibration is, again, calibrating or aligning what your understanding of your own skills and abilities and knowledge are with objective reality. Largely, testing is a big one for calibration, or a big way to calibrate. And calibration it fights against illusions of knowing and illusions of competence. Finally, we read about mnemonic devices. Finishing up this section on it's like additional tips for students. So mnemonic devices, less of a learning tool, more of an organization tool to help you organize, categorize, and more easily retrieve information you've already learned. My big caveat with mnemonics is like, we've already established in this book that the more effortful, dude, I need my own place. The more effortful the retrieval is, the more learning occurs. So it's like, there's some really niche use cases, I think, for mnemonics. That is, you're in a crunch time for memorizing information. Not something you deal with much when you're outside of the school system, for the most part, like I am. So I'm going to go ahead and actually write down what was this section about, because I forgot to do that. So we go back. Here we are. What is this section about? We got 5 other let's say 4 other learning techniques plus mnemonic devices. All right. Then we got into the story about a medical student who came in, didn't have all like as strong of a base in biomedical, biochemistry, and biomedical sciences. So he started out really poorly, even though he was studying a ton. He's basically failing. He failed his first exam, maybe not, maybe whatever 65 is in medical school, maybe an F, maybe a D. So he's like, I need to figure out how to study better. Started looking into the research, found out that retrieval and the testing effect are the keys. And basically he had to overcome his doubts and his fears of using retrieval, because to retrieve information, to read something and then think about it and retrieve about it, think about it, talk about it, that takes so much longer. As you can see, we are on episode, whatever this is, 103. We've spent 50 something hours throughout this book, and this is a 250 page book. Most people will read this in 5 hours or 10 hours, somewhere in between there. So he was just reading, but it wasn't working. And so he started using retrieval, started taking way longer, but he trusted the process and it started to work. And after about a year, he went from the bottom to the top of the medical students. And thanks to retrieval. And also, there's such a vast amount of information that's dumped on you in medical school that you don't have time to, retrieve every detail. You got to prioritize the most important stuff to spend the most retrieval time on, and sometimes you don't have time to retrieve other stuff. It's very similar to what I'm doing right now with this book. It's when it comes to this section on a story, I'm not really taking any notes, and I just retrieved it all in a minute or 2 minutes, and tomorrow I won't spend much time on it. Just 2 sentence overlap or review, because it's really not that important for me. It's just a story rather than the hard facts and details and studies and techniques. So I definitely feel that when I'm in school. It's right now in computer science, I'm limiting myself to about 2 hours per credit hour of studying outside of class, which really limits your time. You can't just do everything you'd want to do. You can't do all these optional things. You can't study all this extra stuff. You can't, do a ton of, it's a resource, and you have a limited amount of it. And in school, every class I've ever been in, it's there's always other stuff you could be doing. And so you have to prioritize it. So that's it for today. we'll finish up this story tomorrow. There's gonna be another story of a psychology student, and then we're gonna be into the next section, which is about learning tips for lifelong learners. So rather than students, we're gonna go more into the lifelong learner tips. So talk to you tomorrow. See ya.